Well, we finally made it to one of the most famous years of Yu-Gi-Oh! Chaos swept across the land, and what else lies in the aftermath but a tribe of animals blamed for the destruction? Scapegoats, if you will. Hey everyone, I'm Jesse from the Janjo Zone, and in this video we will be talking about the notorious and quite popular retro format of Yu-Gi-Oh! The 2005 GOAT format, as well as one specific card that has been the center of debate. The previous chronological entry discussed the whole 2004 year of a children's card game, and just what kind of wacky cards came from that, from Chaos Emperor Dragon to lesser used cards, but still memorable in their own right, like the creator. However, there was one brief format in history I missed I would like to quickly touch upon. While Chaos format was a beast all on its own, it was only a matter of time before something happened, whether it was a limited list or a new set that changed the game once more. In this year's case, it would be the very first Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list that would impede the invasion of Chaos. But once the Chaos ceased, at least in terms of the envoy of the end side of things, one type of monster would pick up the pieces. Here we have the Warrior format, aka Chaos Warrior format. While the August 2004 list would be the first ban list, this format in particular would follow the October 2004 ban list, which declared 5 more cards to be limited: Dark Magician of Chaos, Protector of the Sanctuary, Mystical Space Typhoon, Torrential Tribute, and Morphing Jar going from semi-limited to limited. So technically speaking, this was the first named format with a ban list. The card pool would include up to Rise of Destiny, as mentioned in my 2004 Chaos video. In hindsight, I probably should have added this into that video, but it does have its place magnetizing towards 2005, so it's kind of a weird period. Now, the decks would have to rely more on wit and interaction than explosive chaos plays. The first ever Shonen Jump tournament series in December at SJC GENCON SOCAL would have John Umali receive first place in the more realized warrior format. His prize card would be Cyberstein, a monster that can summon any fusion monster by paying a high price. This Chaos deck would eventually evolve and branch off into various decks of the incoming GOAT format. Very powerful warriors like DD Warrior Lady, DD Assailant, Blade Knight, and I guess Breaker, who's a magical warrior, would all find comfortable positions in the main deck. Decks would go on towards more versatile utility rather than boom goes the dynamite, and this would translate to a rather healthy metagame for more players than before, assuming you're not playing an FTK deck, because remember, Magical Scientist was still around. You still had some variety with Scientist OTK, Chaos Warrior, Chaos Control, Recruiters, and even Anti-Meta Beatdown. There's not a ton of information or play regarding Warrior format, and I believe that's due to it being sort of like a weird cousin to GOAT format. A Stray Lambs format? Looking at old tournament results, it seems that not too many people played FTK, but nowadays it most certainly is viable given the retrospective card pool. So now you have a format that isn't as wild as Chaos and not as fair as GOAT, leaving Warrior in an odd middle ground. Probably why it's one of those largely forgotten eras. With all that said, let's move on to the main course. GOAT format is widely considered to be the last old school format in Yu-Gi-Oh! We'll get to why that is eventually. But what even is GOAT format that I keep talking about? Well, in simple terms, it's the Yu-Gi-Oh! Format played in the summer of 2005. While the card Scapegoat has been around since 2003 from the Joey starter deck, considering the card pool and ban list of 2005, suddenly this card saw way more meta play that claimed the format's name for itself. GOAT uses specifically all cards prior to the release of Cybernetic Revolution on August 6 and subsequent Collector's Tins promos. Technically speaking, GOAT follows the April ban list and one specific set post ban list. This list would feature many new changes from the October list, with some highlights being banning Magical Scientist, Mirage of Nightmare, and Painful Choice, limiting DD Warrior Lady, Sandgan, Delinquent Duo, Graceful Charity, and Mirror Force, and semi-limiting Vampire Lord, Abyss Soldier, and Gravity Bind. This ban list took away many of the broken power cards of years prior and brought back cards that fit the void quite fairly, thus making a nicely balanced format, all things considered. This would also bring forth the Trinity by having Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity, and Delinquent Duo as your staple spells. Prior to April, there was one set released that year, Flaming Eternity on March 1st. The set's cover card is the Winged Dragon of... wait, wrong monster. This is the Sacred Phoenix of Nephthys. I hope I pronounced that right. Like Horus, it's based on an Egyptian god, but is not actually a divine beast. Kind of a shame. Nephthys is a powerful winged beast with a similar effect to Vampire Lord in that it comes back if it is destroyed by an effect. But in this bird's case, it will destroy all spells and traps on the field upon return. Behind Phoenix, if you ever notice, is Deck Devastation Virus. This trap card tributes one of your powerful dark monsters to destroy all your opponent's weak monsters for 3 turns. It's a reverse crush card. Both Nephthys and Virus would find their way to be limited come April. The rest of the set would primarily focus on fusion and beast-type monster support. Key cards of the set would include King Dragoon, Lightning Vortex, Phoenix Wing Wind Blast, the Hex-sealed fusion monsters, Gatling Dragon, Armed Samurai Ben-K, and Rescue Cat. Many of these cards would find use in a variety of decks in GOAT, like Ben-K OTK or Rescue Cat decks. Post-April ban list, however, there would be one more set before the cutoff point, which would be US Nationals, SJC Seattle, and SJC Indianapolis, events where the set Lost Millennium was legal, but Cybernetic Revolution, or CRV for short, and the TINs, which would be an important point to notion. So let's talk about the Lost Millennium, which was released on June 1st, 2005. This set would introduce Yu-Gi-Oh! GX mainstays in Elemental Heroes and Ancient Gears, as well as rock supports. Notable cards include Ancient Gear Golem, Brain Control, Elemental Hero Flame Wingman, and Mega Rock Dragon. Brain Control would be the biggest card from this set, with Mega Rock being a fun piece in Rogue Rock decks, but otherwise this wasn't a huge set, really being that starting point in the transition of Duel Monsters era and GX era Yu-Gi-Oh! So that's the card pool for GOAT format. Another big change was in June with the battle position rule change, where you could now switch a monster's position after it was changed by an effect, really ramping up the combo of Thousand Eyes Restrict and Tsukiyomi, where you could take an opponent's monster, flip Restrict face down, get rid of the equipped monster, and then flip it face up to equip another monster. This also worked with other powerful cards like Book of Moon and Magician of Faith. Time to look at decks and strategies. At the US Nationals, the top deck would be Go Control or Thousand Eyes Lockdown, as called by the pilot Max Suffrage. The strategy of the deck would use a variety of useful powerful monsters like Air Knight Parshath, Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, Jinzo, and Thousand Eyes Restrict thanks to the breakthrough combo of Scapegoat and Metamorphosis. Because of the ban list, certain cards were able to creep out from the primordial ooze with the Sludge of Grudge. Metamorphosis, which came out in Pharaonic Guardian in 2004, was able to access many fusion monsters since Magical Scientist was arrested for illegitimate practice. The control game swept the scene thanks to the great lower level monsters that appeared previously, like Tribe Infecting Virus, Sinister Serpent, and Breaker the Magical Warrior. Then we have SJC New Jersey, which was won by Ryan Hayakawa, using a familiar deck bringing home a nice Cyberstein. In SJC Seattle, first place would go to Osman Ortiz with his own take at Go Control. His spice would have Asura Priest, DD Assailant, Spirit Reaper, and Guardian KS? Turns out because of the lack of problem-solving techs, KS was incorrectly ruled that your opponent couldn't attack whatsoever, and thus, when attacked into, ended the battle phase. There was proper public ruling at the time, it was just a case of bad judging at this particular event. Either way, he won the third and final prize, Cyberstein. In SJC Indianapolis, Nareg Torsen would grab first place with Go Control using a heavier Warrior engine and claimed Des Voltskal. There were decks other than Go Control around at this time, like we saw Zombies by J. Kim in SJC Charlotte, although Anthony Alvarado would take first place with his Go Control deck. The World Championship that year wouldn't be until August 6, but it would still follow GOAT formats, as in cards up to Lost Millennium. The winner would be Miltiades Marco from Greece with his unique control deck featuring Nephthys. The two prize cards here would be King of Destruction, Zegzex, and Queen of Fate, Eternia, which, similar to previous World Championship cards, were like Victory Dragon, with these being based on Fiends and Fairies, respectively. In historical GOAT format, it was clear that Go Control was the optimal top-tier deck at the time. During the retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Revival in the early 2010s, calling this era GOAT format was fitting, although nowadays players look back in retrospect with the card pool in mind and see a rather different meta. See, back then you'd see Go Control, or sometimes Warriors, Zombies, some form of beatdown. Now, Chaos has taken the reins as the top tier deck, while GOATs have taken a back seat. Back in the day, players saw pure Chaos decks as not worth the effort for graveyard play when Thousand Eyes Restrict and other toolbox cards were just so useful from the get-go. Similarly, no one played Solemn Judgment then because life point costs seemed too costly, not so much anymore. Synergy is typically key. Thanks to online duel sites like Dueling Network from 2012, players revived the old format that sparked a movement. Players could go back in a simpler time where all the knowledge was there. It was now up to the players to figure out what would continue to work. In 2017 with Dueling Book, they even added an entire section devoted to GOAT format. Not Edison, not Yugi Kaiba, GOAT. The greatest of all time, perhaps? Now, there are some players that swear that the card Exarion Universe was legal during this format. The thing with Exarion is that it was around a little before release. See, in SJC Indianapolis on August 20th, this was 3 days after the release of Cybernetic Revolution, a game-changing set. However, the set wasn't legal for competitive play by that point. This is not a one-off occurrence. An Upper Deck website lists the legality of Cybernetic Revolution, in which its sneak preview was on August 6th and 7th, and the street date was August 17th, while the tournament legal date was September 1st. And that would be the same date Exarion would be legal as well. So while the cards may have been around earlier, they weren't legal, being a very similar situation to the video game promos of 2002. See, Exarion is actually quite the game changer of a card itself. It's a direct counter to Scapegoat in the way that it can inflict piercing damage in an easier investment than Air Knight Parshath, since you don't have to tribute. Exarion also keeps an on-field presence, unlike Azura Priest, meaning you can commit another monster next turn instead of relying on your spirit monster for your normal summon. It plays in a deck better than King Tiger, and even has better stats than Enraged Battleox with 1800 attack and 1900 defense, also protecting it from Tsukiyomi. Not to mention it has synergy with Chaos being a dark attribute. Universe goes against all GOAT format was built around. It's GOATs against the universe. So while Exarion Universe may add power and uniformity to a 2005 deck, it's way too strong for its own good. It fights the ideology of retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Where a more methodical game based around skill in not only playing, but deck building is the preferred method, aside from OTK decks obviously. While it has been debated on the overall legality, over time players have come to realize and back off from the Universe ship, even if there's still people who play the faux format. The retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Fandom is already fairly small as is compared to the modern game, so overall it hurts new people coming in wondering what's legal and what's not, and hurts deck creativity, which is something that GOAT format otherwise does extremely well nowadays. I mean, Cybernetic Revolution already changes so much, so why play an alternate format just for the sake of one monster that's more toxic than it's good for? I'm sure to trigger some people for saying this, but it's the truth. There's so much content enriched in this 2005 era that I could have gone on forever. The fact that so many Yugi tubers are specifically geared towards this format is no mistake. As I've mentioned and reiterated, GOAT format is made thanks to its ban list getting rid of an abundance of overpowered cards and balancing the game at the peak of nostalgia using everything up till where the game changed once again. Playing involved skill and creativity that would create a revolving door meta. Back then it was mainly one deck most people played, but now you got many variations of Chaos, Reasoning Gate, Warriors, Monarchs, Empty Jar, Gravekeepers, Water Control, Cybersign OTK, Flip Control, Burn Decks, Bazoo Return, and so much more. It really is an enjoyable format that appears to be an endless oasis, and understandable why so many players play it compared to other formats of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. I hope I covered enough to give this format justice and explain some history behind it and why it's so beloved to this day. But from here, the game will pivot in the land of special summoning and introduce new power cards that would quite literally be the cybernetic revolution to Yu-Gi-Oh's pharaonic roots.